Awesome. Well, hello, folks that are here. My name is Delaney and Hiegert. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I'm a 2L at KU Law. Here to talk to y'all about gender marker name changes in Kansas.
I'm Ellen Bertels. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I am also a 2L. That means a second-year law student, 2 out of 3 years at KU Law right now. And we're so excited to be here. Are we going to wait a minute, Dee, or are we going to just launch in?
I think let's maybe go ahead and go through. It looks like we've got some participants loaded up, so.
Sounds good.
Oh, you've got
Oh, yes, this is me. Okay, so hi, everyone. So I'm sure you're wondering, Liz kind of hilariously referred to Dee and I as resident experts on gender marker and name change law in the Facebook page for this, which it made both of us laugh. We were wondering, like, why are we here? Why do we have expertise on this? So this last fall, Delaney and I started a gender marker and name change clinic out of Lawrence, Kansas. We decided that after we got back from our first summers away doing law things, we came back and we were like, there needs to be some kind of pro bono work here at the law school for queer people. And we both kind of independently came up with this idea of a name change clinic. And we'd also heard that there was a change in Kansas's gender marker law. So we were like, okay, if gender marker changes are an option too, we want to figure out how to provide that service to the clients. So we started doing some research and we got in contact with some attorneys who know a lot about name change law. And I have in particular one mentor, David Brown, here in Lawrence. And I thought if anybody knew what was going on, that David knew. So I went and I sat down and talked to him and I said, okay, so what's up with the new gender marker change law? And he said, I have no idea. We're like, okay, great. Well, if David doesn't know, then no one knows. So I knew that it had something to do with the Office of Vital Statistics, the state agency, because they hold birth certificates. So I ended up calling Vital Stats once a week, every week for like a month, like 4 or 5 weeks, and bothering this one person in particular who was really, really kind and gracious, but really I bothered her to death. And we had it basically just figured out what the law was, right? Like what kind of the new restrictions were and what the new requirements were, and no one had published anything about it, and no one really had like a public resource for it. So Delaney and I drafted and ended up publishing the first public resource on the gender marker change law. So we've thought about this a lot. We've been working with clients for the past couple months. We're still taking clients in, which is really exciting, and we're going to do another big push in the fall. But for the time being, we're here to talk to you about how you can do some of this stuff yourself. So I'll let Delaney take it over.
You still have to do this live.
Yep. Yeah, I do. That's true.
So before we get into the nitty gritty, I just want to make the point that as Ellen and I said, we are law students and not attorneys. So we have a fun little legal disclaimer that I'll read. The information provided in this presentation does not and is not intended to constitute legal advice. Further, use of this presentation or any of the materials and links contained within do not create an attorney and client relationship, because we aren't attorneys. We've compiled and provided this presentation for general informational purposes only. So now we've got that out of the way. Here is a roadmap, just kind of what this presentation is going to touch on. So I'm going to talk to y'all real quickly about kind of history and background on gender marker laws at the state level. And then I'm going to talk to y'all about the Foster case, which is the case Ellen mentioned, that changed the gender marker law in Kansas this past summer. And then I'll hand it over to Ellen, and Ellen will talk to y'all about the gender marker and name change processes in Kansas, and how to go about that. And then we'll have some time for some questions. So this is slide talking about state law on gender marker changes on birth certificates. But before we get into what this slide is and what this all means, I want to kind of make a point of why state law matters. So when you're, the first step, you go through to change your gender marker on ID documents is changing it on your birth certificate, because the birth certificate is what we call a breeder document, where until the birth certificate's been amended, you can't get your driver's license or other documents amended. And why state law is so important in that aspect is that the state, so wherever your birth certificate is, which is usually where you were born, is the state that controls whether or not you can get your birth certificate, your gender marker changed on your birth certificate. So it's important to know what the state law is where your birth certificate's housed. So this map on the screen that we're looking at is kind of the lay of the land as of June 1st, 2019. So the beginning of this past summer. As you can see, there's 3 dark orange states, Kansas included. Those were the 3 states at the time that had complete bans. So they would not allow gender marker changes on birth certificates for any reason. The dark green that you see on the screen are the states that affirmatively allow gender marker changes on birth certificates with no surgical requirements and no court order. And then the colors in between that you see, the beige kind of up through the light orange, are all different variations of states that technically allow gender marker changes on birth certificates, but they have burdensome or unnecessary requirements like gender confirmation surgery or court orders, things of that nature. So if we look at what the map looks like today, this is the lay of the land. You can see that Kansas has flopped from dark orange to this dark green. That is because of this Foster v. Anderson case that we'll be talking to you all about here in a second. So I just wanted to highlight that that's great news, but also note that Idaho, up in the left corner there, it was green, dark green. It was a pretty good law at the start of last summer, but actually the beginning of 2020, they passed a law that it reinstituted their ban on gender marker changes on birth certificates. So hopefully Lambda Legal or an advocacy organization is going to be filing, but just kind of something I wanted to note. And then another thing that's neat on these maps, just to point out, is the states that have stars on them are the states that allow for M, F, or X as a gender marker on a birth certificate in that state. So that's the lay of the land as far as state law and kind of the background on Kansas. So now let's talk about Foster v. Anderson, the case that actually changed the law. So the complaint for this case was initially filed October 2018, and it was filed against 3 state agencies: the Department of Health and Environment, the Office of Vital Statistics, and State Registrar. So the reason these 3 state agencies were named as defendants is because in prior proceedings, Lambda Legal had found out that these 3 agencies had essentially a secret policy to deny automatically any requests for gender marker changes on birth certificates. So after they had found this out, they decided to file the Foster v. Anderson case. So in this case, they alleged that this secret denial policy violated constitutional rights to equal protection, due process, and First Amendment free speech. So we obviously had a great outcome in this case, but before we move on to talk about the holding and the state of the law, I want to take a moment to recognize the plaintiffs that were involved in this case. Just because, these are 4 trans Kansans that, dedicated some time and sacrificed their lives, for the cause or not sacrifice their lives, sacrifice time and the view of the public eye on their lives, to get this law changed. And I think it's really important that we recognize them. So I want to take a minute to talk about them. Nyla Foster is one of the plaintiffs. She's from Kansas City, Kansas originally. She works as an artist and an LGBTQ community advocate and organizer in the Kansas City, Missouri area now. Specifically, she's involved with the Trans Women of Color Collective in KCMO. Luke Ben Simone was another plaintiff. He's from Topeka, Kansas, and he works as an activist and advocate for the disability rights and LGBTQ communities. He was also a co-founder of K-STEP, and he's the current Kansas representative for Black Trans Men, Inc. The third plaintiff is Jessica Hicklin. She's from Medicine Lodge. She's currently incarcerated in Mineral Point, Missouri, and she works as an advocate for the rights of trans people in prison. And also something really neat to note is that prior to being a plaintiff in this case and doing the great advocacy work here, Jessica was a plaintiff in another case that expanded trans inmates' access to healthcare. And then real quickly before we talk about this consent judgment, I want to note that there was a fourth plaintiff, CK, who remained anonymous because of concerns for employment and safety. But I just wanted to note that there were 4 plaintiffs. And so just really recognize and appreciate what they've done for the community in Kansas. So let's talk about the consent judgment. This is basically the result of the Foster v. Anderson case. So the judgment came down June 21st, 2019, this past summer. And actually, we were really lucky because this case never had to go to trial. The attorney for the state agreed that the process needed changed. You know, obviously this law is transphobic and outdated, and, you know, the fact that it was a secret pact in and of itself, you know, points to the fact that it shouldn't exist. So we were lucky that the attorney was willing to work with the Lambda and Brian Cave on that. And then Judge Daniel Crabtree, he is the judge that gave the ruling in this case. He found that it violated constitutional rights. And I have a quote here just kind of pointing out the specific, really affirmative language that is used in the judgment. The defendants shall provide certified copies of birth certificates to transgender individuals that accurately reflects their sex, consistent with their gender identity. So that was the holding of the consent judgment. And that's, you know, really explicit affirming language. So we're happy with that. So we'll move on. Then I will just kind of wrap up. So before Foster v. Anderson, prior to this case, Kansas required a court order to get a gender marker change on a birth certificate. And obviously it was at the judge's discretion still then. And on top of that, as we've pointed out, these agencies had a pact to refuse any gender marker changes regardless. But after Foster v. Anderson, there's no longer a court order requirement to change the gender marker. And it's actually now not even a court process. So you don't have to appear in court or file in the court. It's all administrative. It's simply sending in an application, an affidavit, and certification to Vital Stats. And then they will send you your amended birth certificate. But I will let Ellen talk to you more about the specifics there.
Great, thank you, Dee. Also, I apologize for my slow clicking. Usually I'm the one talking and Delaney's the one clicking. So we're all over the board here. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you about the law for gender marker and name changes, not just like what the law says, but the actual process of going through the different changes. I wanna make like, I think 2 or 3 points real quick. One, if you have questions as we're going through this, please drop them in the Q&A. I might not get to them as we go unless something really kind of pressing comes up, but we will definitely get to them afterwards. And I know that sometimes saving your question makes it hard to remember later. 2, the gender marker change process is easier than the name change process. So if as you're going through, you're like, oh wow, this seems like name change is more complicated. That's true. And that's okay, that's what we're here for, to kind of explain that, but I just wanted to give you a primer that the gender marker change stuff is going to be simpler and that the name change stuff might be more complex. And 3, on the name change information, or the gender marker for that point, we've provided Liz with GLSEN with a bunch of links to things. So if there's something that you miss as I'm talking, it's okay. Everything I'm saying is available in one resource or another online, and we've given GLSEN kind of all of our best tools that we use when we're walking through these processes ourselves. So there's definitely all sorts of information online, and you don't have to memorize it now. We'll get to it. Okay, so I'm going to start with the gender marker change process, and I went forward a slide and I shouldn't have, and now it's not. Oh, there we go. Okay, so you can change your gender marker under this process if your birth certificate is in Kansas. This almost always means that you were born in Kansas. So if you were born in Kansas and you know that you have a birth certificate, which like 99% of people do, then this applies to you. I'm also going to go through the required documents that you have to send in, and then kind of the process for how Vital Stats gets back to you. Okay, so there's 5 documents. Again, this is frankly a very easy process. So for adults, you file an application. This application essentially just asks you to give a lot of personal information. This information isn't so that they can like mess with your info. It's literally so they can find your birth certificate. There's millions of birth certificates on file with the state back to like the 1860s. And they have to find the right one. And there's lots of people with different names or with similar names who are born on similar dates. So it's a lot of identifying information, but it's literally just so they can find your birth certificate. Then you file an affidavit that essentially says, yes, I am this person, and yes, I do want my gender marker changed. You'll have to get this notarized. And then you'll provide a copy front and back of a state issued ID. This can be a driver's license. This can be a municipal ID. Pretty straightforward. The final thing that we understand is kind of a tripping point for a lot of people, and we wish it weren't this way, is you have to get a certification from a health professional that says that you essentially are in the process of socially transitioning. The language that I've included here in the box on the right, I'm going to point this out. So we don't know for sure whether you have to have a gender dysphoria diagnosis to get your gender marker changed. The law doesn't say that. The law doesn't require it. But the issue is that healthcare professionals might require that to be able to write this letter. It depends on your health professional. This can be an MD, like your family doctor, or it can be a licensed social worker or a psychologist. It can be lots of different people in the healthcare system. The one thing we do know, and the one thing we've been telling clients, is that the language that's in this green box to the right of the screen is language that they will accept. So if you have your doctor write a letter that exactly verbatim has that language in it, the Office of Vital Statistics will accept that as the letter required. So whether they would take other language, it's unclear. It kind of depends on the letter, but we know for sure that if you have a healthcare professional who can write this letter, then you're good. The last thing you need is $15 check or money order, no cash, and it's also $15 per copy. So if you want like weirdly dozens of copies of your birth certificate for some reason, you'd have to pay $15 for each. But you take all this stuff, you put it in an envelope, you send it to the Office of Vital Statistics, and under normal circumstances, they would get back to you in 2 or 3 weeks, and they'd send you back a copy of your amended birth certificate. Under current circumstances, I don't know. I don't know whether they're working, I don't know whether they're doing amendments, but once they're back in office, surely it'll be pretty quick. For minors, this is the same process, except that instead of being the minor's name and signature on the application, affidavit, and issued ID, it just has to be a legal guardian's name. So if you're under 18 and you don't have a state issued ID, no worries, you just get your parent to fill it out for you, or your legal guardian. Okay, so that's it. I mean, it's truly that easy. I'm gonna go through some frequently asked questions, but truly it is that easy. So 1, do I need an attorney to complete this application? No, you don't. It's incredible. You just do it yourself. If you have questions, you can come to an attorney because it's still a legal process, but yeah, you can do it all on your own. Will you receive a new birth certificate or an amended birth certificate? That's a good question. Thanks, me. So unfortunately, you won't get a new birth certificate. In an ideal world, you would get a brand new birth certificate that didn't say amended on it, but what the law is here in Kansas is that they amend your first birth certificate and they put a stamp in the corner that says amended. It's not ideal, but birth certificates aren't public records, so no one can like go look this up to see whether your birth certificate's been amended at any point. Can I have a non-binary marker like X on a Kansas birth certificate? As of right now, again, no, unfortunately. Delaney was kind of showing us the different parts on the map where you can have an X gender marker, a gender neutral gender marker, but we don't have that yet.
10 states do.
Yeah, but some do. So that's a point of advocacy, I think, that some groups are working on, is trying to get that moved forward. 10 states. So will this automatically change the gender marker on my driver's license? No, so that's also a separate process. You'll have to apply for a gender marker change to your driver's license through the DMV, we've actually provided a link to that process in our materials as well. So we'll make sure everyone has access to that. If you never had an ID before, if you've never had a driver's license before, however, and you provide the DMV with your new birth certificate, your amended birth certificate, then it'll just add the amended gender marker to it, because that's what's on the birth certificate now. Okay, so name change. Again, I want to reiterate, this is more complicated, and that's okay. We have a lot of really good resources that we're going to provide you with. You don't have to get all of it this time around. And if you have questions, you can talk to an attorney. You can call our clinic, and we're happy to give you as much guidance and representation as we can. There's also lots of private attorneys who do this work, and Kansas Legal Services, which is another nonprofit, can do this work as well. So to have your name changed in Kansas, you need to be a resident of the state of Kansas, which means you have to have lived here for 30 days. You have to prepare the documents that I'm going to talk about, and then you have to show up in court and have a chit chat with the judge, and they have to sign your order and then file it away. Oh, I've already said this. Yeah. I preempted myself, but this is one of the documents that I'm giving you access to, that we're sending you a link to. It's really, really comprehensive. I actually based my slideshow on this document, so if you have questions, you can refer back to it. Okay, so the first thing you have to do to get your name changed is fill out a petition. This is a two-part document. You file a civil information cover sheet. Again, this is linked in the materials, and then you complete the petition for change of name. Think of this petition as a letter to the court asking the court to change your name legally. You fill in some information. There's forms that have it already. You don't have to come up with it on your own. And essentially, you fill in information about yourself, and then you give an explanation for why you want your name legally changed. We hear different versions of how people explain this, especially trans and non-binary people. So you can come straight out and say, I'm a transgender person, and I want a name that matches my gender identity, or this name affirms my gender identity. You don't have to be that explicit about it, though. We also know people who have gone a more subtle route if they were afraid to directly out themselves to the court, and have said something kind of less specific, like this is the name that I'm socially known by, and I want my legal name to match my social name. Or this is the name that I prefer. And something as simple as that is a legitimate reason to change your name as well. So you don't have to necessarily out yourself in that form, but you're of course welcome to if you're comfortable with it. Another consideration is that this is a public filing, so people in the public might have access to this petition. So that might change the decision that you make. You get this petition notarized, and then you file it with the clerk of the court. So what happens is you take your printed out sheet, and you take it to your county courthouse, and you find the clerk, and honestly, if you don't know where the clerk is, just ask someone who's walking past, and they'll be like, oh, it's right over here. And you go to the clerk and you say, hey, I want to file this petition for name change with the clerk of the court. I know before going to law school, this would have scared the hell out of me, but it's a really, really simple process. And the clerk does this literally for a living, so they will know how to guide you through the process. You make sure you get the case number and the court division assignment so that you can set up a hearing later. So when you file your petition, another thing the court clerk is going to ask you for is the filing fee. So all domestic legal issues require you to pay a fee to file your issue in court. It depends on the county, it depends on what you're filing for, but the best kind of general basis we've gotten for this is like $195, $200 to file for a name change in Kansas. This is a lot of money, and we recognize that, and it's not ideal. And even for people who, not even people who aren't low income, that's still a huge chunk of change. So there are options for how you might be able to get around this filing fee. You can apply to have the filing fee waived. Again, this is a document that we've provided in the materials below. But essentially, if you give a form to the court that says, I'm at or below 200% of the federal poverty line, meaning that I make less than like $32,000 per year for a family of 2, or 48 for a family of 4, and I can't afford to pay this fee. And the court has a process by which they waive the fee and you don't have to pay it. So what happens is that you will provide this to the court clerk at the same time that you provide the petition, and the court clerk will take it to the judge, and the judge will decide whether or not to issue the waiver, so to waive the fee. So once you have filed your petition, and once you have a determination on whether your filing fee will be waived, the next thing you have to do is provide notice. So notice is essentially, not essentially, it's required by the statute that governs name changes in Kansas. It means that you have to provide the public with a notification of your intent to change your name. Courts say that they do this in order to like keep you from defrauding people, essentially. So they don't want you to be able to change your name and then be like, I don't owe you money anymore. That's what they say it's for. I don't doubt that, but it also has the negative impact, specifically on trans and non-binary people, of making you out yourself to the public, potentially numerous times, because you have to provide something that not only dead names yourself, but then says this person's changing their name to this thing. It's not ideal. We also know that. We've kind of faced some of those issues. So the good news is that there are two types of notice in the state of Kansas. The type of notice that most people hear about is publication. So this is when when you provide a personal ad in the newspaper for 3 consecutive weeks. Again, this is forcing a person to out themselves, and it can be really expensive to have to do. It can be up to like $180 to provide that notice. But the Kansas statute also provides that you can provide notice in a different way, which is notice by certified mail. This means that you send a certified letter to all of your creditors, so all the people that you owe money to, and then you essentially tell the judge, you bring back the like mail certification to the judge, and you say, I have provided notice to all of my creditors, the job is done, there you go. So we recommend that if you're doing this on your own, that you provide notice by certified mail, because it's cheaper, it's easier, and you don't have to publicize your name change. But it also depends on how many creditors you have, that type of thing. For a minor, for someone who's like 17, 18, who's never taken out a loan, this is the easiest option because there's no one to notify. So you say, Judge, I've provided notice by certified mail. There's no one to notice. We're done. It depends again on your situation, what you want to do, but you don't have to publish your notice. You can do it by certified mail if you prefer. So
real quick before we move on, just to make sure folks had seen, in Sedgwick County specifically, the process for minors is super easy and much cheaper. $30 for minors is what Liz has said. It does require parent permission from both parents' legal guardians on the birth certificate, however. So important to know. But yeah, as Ellen said, the process is much cheaper for minors and quicker because there's no debtors. But I just wanted to flag that.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I didn't have my chat open. Yeah, so yes, it's easier for minors in Sedgwick County. We haven't done as many of those, so it's probably easier to contact Liz at Glisten rather than us, because we just don't know as much about the process. But that is really exciting. And I was about to get to that actually, that if you are a minor, this is an easier process overall. Okay, so the ways that you can change your name. So far I've been talking about pro se name changes, which is where you, the individual, do the process yourself in court. Thankfully, we started a clinic so that people don't have to do that, because it's not the most fun thing in the world, I know. So if you don't want to do it yourself, or you can't afford to do it yourself, or you're just nervous about it, which is completely understandable, contact us. This is our phone number. It's if anyone has a problem seeing this, it's 785-864-5564. We can also provide, I think we put our flyer in the details, but we do pro bono name changes and gender marker changes for low-income people who are residents of Kansas. So please, if you have any questions, even if you're not sure if you qualify as low income, please contact us because we've got wiggle room and we are taking clients in. You can also, I will say we work out of Douglas County, we work in Lawrence. and our meetings occur in Lawrence when we're allowed to see people in person. So if you can't travel to Lawrence, which is also completely understandable, there's other offices that do cheap or pro bono, so free name changes in Kansas. So Kansas Legal Services does this type of work all the time. I don't know that they have as much background specifically on working with trans and non-binary people, and we try to make sure that all of our interns are really well versed on kind of cultural competency. But we know a bunch of people at KLS. They're really, really kind. They're doing really good work, and they know the law really well. So if you're not around Douglas County or you can't make it to Douglas County for your name change, please feel free to reach out to KLS because this is one of their staples. You can also talk to private attorneys. You will have to pay them, and we're trying to give you options to not have to pay people, but there's plenty of private family law attorneys who do this work as well. Okay, some follow-up FAQs. Do I have to do this in the county that I live in? So as I kind of hinted at earlier, no, you actually don't have to do it in the county you live in. The Kansas statute says that you must get your name changed where you are, but does not explicitly require, from what we understand, doesn't require you to be in any certain county. So you can come, if you're not in Douglas County, talk to us and we can work on finding a way to get it done here if that's possible for you. Do both parents have to support a minor's name change? So this is a more complicated question. The Kansas statute doesn't say one way or the other, which means that the courts kind of have had to decide over the last couple decades. As not an attorney, and specifically not a family law attorney, I'm hesitant to give you one answer or another. I think your best option here is to reach out to, again, either a private attorney, Kansas Legal Services, or our clinic, and to actually get representation in a case where one of the parents disputes a name change. This may be different again in Sedgwick County, which seems to have a more streamlined process for minor name changes, but at least in Douglas and in the KCK area, I would talk to an attorney and get some guidance on this.
Liz mentioned in the chat that in Sedgwick specifically, they do require both parents. Okay. But outside of Sedgwick, we don't have a specific basis, so it's kind of more a judge by judge basis. That's why it's iffy.
Right. Yeah, and there's case law on it, and there's like pretty decent case law on it, but it's, again, there's just no like real conclusive thing. So I hesitate to give you a promise one way or the other outside of Sedgwick. So any other recommendations for minor name changes? I recommend that if you are a minor or you are a guardian of a minor, and that minor knows that they want a name change and they know what name change they want to do, and they're really sure about it, get it done before they're 18 years old. Again, not an attorney, that's not legal advice, that's practical advice, just in that there's less restrictions and there's a lower cost for minors. That's purely a pragmatic suggestion. So if you are a minor, or again, you're a legal guardian of a minor, I would consider getting it done before 18. Again, not an attorney though. If I'm doing this by myself, but the filing system is complicated, who should I ask for questions? So like I said, reach out to us, reach out to KLS. We've talked to people who started the process themselves, and then we kind of helped take it over from there. And we're happy to represent you if we can, just pending, income thresholds and client base. What if I'm a resident of a different state or have a name change from a different state? So if you're a resident from a different state, so if you have resided in a different state for the last 30 days, probably like Oklahoma or Missouri, we hear a lot of, if you reside in Kansas for 30 days, then you're eligible to get your name changed here. But you do have to be living here essentially full-time for those 30 days. If you want to, you can always just go through the process in your state, but the requirements are probably going to differ to some extent. The next question, or what if I have a name change order from a different state? It's applicable everywhere. That's the great thing. So if you have an order from a judge in any state, you can use that to prove that your legal name is changed in Kansas or any of the other 50 states or territories. And you can also use it to change your name on your driver's license in Kansas. That's the other good thing. Or your passport or what have you. So yes, that applies everywhere. And then the last question, will this amend the name on my birth certificate or driver's license? No. Much like with the gender marker, unlike the gender marker change, which does amend your birth certificate, the name change does not automatically amend your birth certificate. And you also don't have to. If you are fine never looking at your birth certificate again and just letting it go to the dregs of time, no need to amend it. But if that's important to you personally to have the new name on your birth certificate, you'll have to go through a separate application process for that. The same as with the driver's license, you'll have to apply to the DMV to have the name changed on your driver's license. One thing we recommend that we've kind of just like, again, pragmatically talked about, if you apply to have your gender marker changed while you're going through the court order process, but you don't have the court order yet, then you're gonna have to file 2 different applications for amendments on your birth certificate, right? First, you'll have to do the gender marker, and then once you have the court order, then you'll have to do the name change. If you intend to do them both, then wait to do the gender marker change until you've done the birth certificate, or until you've done, the name change, and then you can file it all in one application. And we actually asked Vital Stats about this. We were like, hey, what if people just like put them in the same envelope and give you $15 instead of $30? And they were like, yeah, okay, we'll take it. So you can do them both at the same time. You just have to wait till you have the court order to do both of them. Okay. I think that's all I've got. We should go to the Q&A now. Dee, did I miss anything?
Not in the chat. If you pull up Q&A, we can send that answer live.
I think I'm gonna stop sharing if that's okay.
Yeah, it's your screen.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. All right, we're looking through some of these questions. 1 second.
I'll start with Milo's in the chat.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Milo asked, would you recommend doing the gender marker or name change first? I would say doing the name change, starting the name change process, just because it's longer and you have to file your petition and you have to wait to get a date with the court. That's going to take a little while to get all that scheduled and set up, and they might schedule you out a month or 2 in advance. So starting that process while you're getting your paperwork for the gender marker change is probably just easier than waiting for one to do the other, if that makes sense. Kendall, thank you.
Here, you have to click if you want to answer that second one live. I'm typing an answer to.
Oh. Okay. Yes. Okay. Sorry, this is new to me. I'm bad at this. Okay, so Anonymous asked, with sending notice by mail, what's the definition of a creditor? Good question, and not one that I am, I don't know that I'm necessarily well equipped to answer that question. I think it probably depends. That's the worst thing about law school, is that you ask a professor anything and they're like, it depends. But here it's probably someone that you owe a debt to. So if you're paying back student loans or a car loan or a house loan, or I guess, and again, this is a shot in the dark, so don't rely on this exactly. But I would also guess, like, if you owe back money on a credit card or utilities, that you would probably have to provide notice to those people. That's one of the things that our attorneys work with people on when we provide notice by mail, is making a list of the creditors that they have, because sometimes people forget about money that they've owed people. So if you know that you have a lot of debt or just many little pockets of debt, I would recommend either notice by publication or working with an attorney to get your certified mail out.
I was muted. Knew it was going to happen once. Okay, so question was, if I'm changing my name in a county that I'm not a legal resident in, will it affect where my residency is? So my interpretation of this is no. The only the reason that you're allowed to file outside of where you are a resident is because the statutory language, so the text of the statute doesn't say residency, it says where you are. So attorneys can argue that you are in Douglas County when we're filing for you that day. It shouldn't impact any other, your actual legal residency or any other aspects, is my understanding.
Yeah, that makes sense. We have a comment that says that in Sedgwick, they don't usually provide notice they don't do notice by publication. Oh, and the instructions don't even include it. So it seems like Sedgwick is doing kind of a progressive version of this, where they're trying to push towards things that we already would want them to do. Notice by certified mail, kind of a more lenient standard for minors. That's really exciting. I'm glad to hear it.
And just kind of generally on that notice point, it is outside of Sedgwick a judge by judge basis. So if you have a good judge, you're more likely gonna get to be able to do the filing fees by mail and avoid publication for the most part.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it's also important to remember that like this is always going to be happening in your county courthouse, which means that it is kind of a judge by judge issue, because that's how a lot of family law and kind of civil law goes at the state level. But it also means that these are judges who primarily do stuff like name changes. You know, they have seen 1,000 of these. So this is not necessarily new information for them. You know, if you go in and you don't know exactly what you're doing, they've seen so many scared people in front of the court for the first time, and are happy to kind of help walk you through it. Or if you're nervous, they're happy to like work with you on it. Another thing I wanted to note that we've been working on is getting, I think Delaney knows where I'm going with this, contacting the judge or the court in some context before your hearing to prep the judge on your pronouns. I think this is probably particularly important for people with non-binary pronouns who like if in their petition it's using they them and the judge is not familiar with non-binary pronouns. So calling the court clerk and saying, hey, I'm going to be in front of this judge on this date, and I use the pronouns they them, or I use the pronouns Zer. Is there any way that you can tell the judge that these are the pronouns I'll be using, and to try to use them to the best of the judge's ability during this hearing? We've worked on, we kind of do them in batches, so we've worked on this kind of at a larger level, but we've also, from what I understand, had really good luck with judges who are adapting quickly to using they them once you kind of prep them on it.
We're also, if this is any, I don't know, consolation to folks, like working on just generally trying to get more trainings for judges, or at least comprehensive packets of materials, so that these folks, even though, yeah, they want people to feel comfortable in their courtroom, but we also understand that, you know, oftentimes, even if someone's good, you know, really good intentions, if they just don't have the competency, it's still going to be maybe a kind of a traumatic experience. So we're working on finding new ways to kind of educate the judges across the state and get those on board, you know, really on board and where they should be with their competency and sensitivity around trans and non-binary topics.
Yeah, and we work on it too within our own clinic. We wanted to make sure when we set out to do this that there was a really ground level competency throughout the office, not just the people doing the legal work, but the people doing, you know, kind of the administrative work, and the people just overseeing the other attorneys, that they understood the specific needs of trans and non-binary people going through this process, and why it was critical that we pay a lot of attention to pronouns and whatnot. So we're trying to kind of reinforce that across the state. If y'all have any questions specific, just not even like specific what gender marker name changes, but other legal issues you run into, or other things that you think that attorneys and judges ought to know, we would love to hear it. We're really trying to expand the competency and the, I don't want to say inclusivity, that's not the word I'm looking for, but we want lawyers to be better for trans people. That's really it. we're trying to make that better across the state. So if you have any needs or concerns, feel free to reach out. All right.
Wow.
Are we
wrapped it up a bit quicker than we thought? That was our first go around of this presentation, so sorry about that. Folks were really wanting to burn an hour and a half of their quarantine day.
We know that there's not a lot else to do. I should probably reference just like real quick how this is affecting courts. So Kansas courts are currently closed except for emergency hearings, and I think those are happening by Zoom. We haven't heard anything about name changes being emergency proceedings. I've mostly only heard criminal dockets, so people who are in prison who are trying to get out, essentially. So we don't know how long that's going to last. I wish we had an answer for you. We also don't know if, like I said, the state's doing gender marker changes in the interim, but we hope so, and we hope that we hope that this whole thing gets resolved soon, but I wish we had more to tell you about that. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, and some people in the comments, if you're thinking that after this you're going to need help, like we said, look through those materials. Please give the clinic a call. Even though the courts aren't working, Ellen and I we don't want to do law school, so we'll definitely be doing this work. So please reach out.
Yeah. Thank you all
for tuning in. Thank you, GLSEN and WSU and the center for sponsoring this. We really appreciate it and for getting this out there.
Yeah, you're all the best. Thank you.